our topic initially focused on exploring how race not only intersects with, but is influenced by the workplace, and how this systemically allows exploitation of workers. And this exploitation is not limited to sexual means, but also manufacturing, service, and entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm. And like our research has been about, you know, like how everything is like connected. Everything is like boom, 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 you know, like intersectionality, which we'll get into in a little bit, and like the data around all of this exploitation and racism in like obviously institutions, but specifically in the workforce, and then our solutions that we want to focus on when we're talking about reconstructing the workplace and how they handle like DEI protocols and stuff like that.
We're going to define the 5 main concepts that we've drawn up so that the argument we compose kind of flows a little bit more naturally.
So our first term is kind of two combined. It's structure and agency, as they work like hand in hand. Structure refers to the organization of like these institutions and how like these patterns of power dynamics, institutions, the roles people play in those institutions, and the norms that govern our society, while agency is the capacity for individuals to like make these choices and act independently within these institutions. Agency shows how our desire to make one's life successful with working hard, not making complaints, and that connects to exploitation, which we'll talk about soon. Our second concept was intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw coined this term, and it comes up a lot and is applicable to a lot of the readings we did throughout the term. Intersectionality is simply the compounding of individuals' identities that make more unique experiences that pertain to like the privileges they get, and then also like the discriminations they face. This framing helps us understand why Black trans women and low-income sex workers experience high rates of sexual assault in the workplace and workplace abuse, as well as how undocumented workers are coerced into silence because they exist at the intersection of multiple systems that devalue not only their safety but also like the labor and the work they put out into society.
Yeah, so I feel like all of our intersectionality is kind of different, but we all face some sort of like
challenge
or privilege. Like I'm white, so like white comfort, boom, privilege. But am I poor? Boom, circle, like boom, border.
This just underlines how like although our oppressions are different, they're so similar because they're all related back to like these systems that bound us and compress a lot of like marginalized groups.
Yeah, we'll face different disparities,
right? Like I'm Latina, but I'm not undocumented, and I don't have to worry about my immigration status. So that kind of puts me separately from a lot of other Latinos, right? Because it's a privilege, right? It's a privilege to not worry about your immigration status and not have to think about things twice.
Y'all worry about walking home alone at night.
Yeah,
so
in the dark. And we're men.
Literally, when I got verbally attacked by a man today, calling me, he said, "Slow the fuck down, you fucking bitch." And I was like, "Whoa, guys!" And I thought maybe he's gonna sucker punch me. And was I on a speedy bike?
He did with his words.
Yes, I was accosted. Mm-hmm. When we were talking about intersectionality and how that affects workers and especially women and undocumented workers, it ties into labor alienation and sexual exploitation or exploitation in general. Because okay, labor alienation. Let's think Karl Marx. Okay, our man, the myth, the man, the legend. He was like, yeah, capitalism responsible for everything bad and like made inequality the thing that it is today, and literally fuck capitalism. Like that's where the powers come from. That's where the rich white men are, and that's how they benefit. Like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, like all of the Reagans. All these men profit off of capitalism. Usually white rich men capitalize off of capitalism because the power stay in power. Labor alienation stemmed from Karl Marx. That's one of Karl Marx's theories, and he was like the main basis in sociology. And I think like a lot of people who are sociologists take a lot of their ideas and theories from Karl Marx, and it's pretty much just where the values of like institutions are like heavy, and it encourages the exploitation of workers and also encourages exploitation, and then like especially sexual exploitation. And we talked about this in our other sociology class.
And I also think about that like the whole self-made ideology, it centers and caters to white men, because when you think of like sex work, it's like heavily stigmatized, and like because it's criminalized, like the act, a lot of the time sex workers don't really reach out to police. Or like talking about media, we watch SVU.
Oh, Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Oh my god, yeah.
That media, although like it's media is reflective of real life, situations. With like it being so criminalized and like frowned upon, it's very hard for these women to seek help, even though our society, American society, pushes this like self-made wealth. And although their wealth is self-made in a way, it's not socially accepted, and they're kind of viewed as like bottom tier people, which makes it like really hard for them to navigate their own like social lives.
The way that exploitation also kind of like labor alienation and exploitation also kind of reminds me of like Reading Punished and
or the Human Targets.
I was like, I can only ever remember Punished as the title, but when we talk about that, like the criminalization aspect of that also applies to like women and men and most people who are people of color, because that criminalization is so embedded into the government and the police systems. And I feel like the exploitation of women who face like sexual abuse,
like in like most situations, like when a police officer is like coming into a situation, and it's always like, well, what did you do to put yourself in this situation? But then it's like you don't ever think about like the decisions that had to be made, and that kind of goes back to like the book we read, Impossible Choices. There are a lot of sex workers that are of like Latin origin or probably from other places across the world. A lot of them probably immigrants, who cannot find a stable job without documentation, and that's that's what they choose to do with their life, and now more than ever they're at risk. They were already vulnerable, and now they're 10 times more vulnerable.
To piggyback off of what you were saying with ICE and like DHS and Homeland Security and just deportation as a whole, I really think it parallels trafficking and like sex trafficking, because that's viewed as something like really bad. I hope we all agree. When it comes to like these black and brown bodies, especially like Latino ones being deported, it's all of a sudden it's not framed as big of a trafficking issue.
But kind of like to start switching into like solutions like
separate labor law enforcement, different from immigration enforcement, to protect people who are undocumented or are in the process of getting their legalization, and having this space for workers to report abuse or concerns in their workplace without being at risk of having immigration enforcement come to your home or come to your workplace. Kind of similar to a Good Samaritan Act, where you won't get in trouble for reporting an act of abuse, but having those labor law enforcement who are there to implement the policies and implement the laws that are created. This can be an organization that is state funded, or maybe it becomes something like kind of like a nonprofit, and it would require going to workplaces to ensure that there's a safe and healthy work environment, especially, like we said, for undocumented workers. I think that would be very beneficial, and I think it would be kind of like what social workers are for the workforce, to be able to implement the laws and the policies. Having these worker enforcers, I guess we could call them, would allow workers to know and understand their rights. In addition to the HR committees that we had talked about previously, I think this would be a great idea and a great solution to some of these exploitations that people are struggling with.
It's also hard to even fathom thinking of a solution when we are kind of just grasping straws right now of like anything to do with inclusion or equality, because fuck the Trump administration. What the fuck? DEI
scraps.
Yeah, DEI cut off. Healthcare cut off.
Community is great for belonging and like building up enough like unity in order to fight against these institutions. We should be able to rely on our government.
Yeah.
That's the entire point of it being here, especially for America.
Yeah. And then I think like the solutions or the thought that I had is, like in Oregon, we have laws that are supposed to protect workers, and we were one of the first states to implement like making sure workers had schedules that were timely, and that like there were steady HR people, like all of these regulations and solutions. We even read about it in a day's work in our other sociology class, that it can be important to have somebody who is employed by the state to go to businesses where there's low wage work and more common jobs where people are working as like immigrants. Employing a worker that is from the state and goes to businesses and make sure they're actually following the labor laws for the state. And I know that's like a crazy solution, that's really big, but I think that's something that I find is pretty important and could be just a simple step forward. Even though I know a lot of businesses would probably fall through the cracks, I think just trying to implement workers for the state who can go around to businesses and make sure, because like at least in my job, we have like the state come like at each time, and case managers come and make sure we're actually like following the regulations to make sure we're not like abusing our clients and not like destroying our home, and like we're actually following the rules and doing our correct documentation. So I think that's something that can be implemented in different lines of work.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing it with Starbucks right now. Like Starbucks is on like a union strike, I believe, because of their workers' rights are not being protected, they're not being respected, and so it's like it's so. I think it would be very easy and very tone deaf of us to just throw out a bunch of different like solutions and like try to like create these hypotheticals. But I think like if we're being literal, which I think we all are trying to be as literal as possible, is that it's really hard to find a solution right now. I think it doesn't matter where you come from, or I mean these days what you really look like. We're all feeling the pressures of the government, and
Except for rich women.
yeah, except for actually
Small demographic.
yeah,
Especially in these like unregulated fields where this is where like a lot of exploitation happens, because a lot of the workers don't really have that many options. Like they can't just get a new job. And so I think that's why we keep like underlining the importance of actually like following through with these policies. And I think of honestly like the legalization of weed, in the sense that if it's not legalized and it's known to be such a thing that like people are getting their hands on, people are going to smoke weed regardless of whether it's like illegal or not, if they are able to access it. And a lot of the times people are trying to access these things for themselves for whatever reason that might be. And because such a large demographic, or like it's known that a lot of people are going to try and access this thing, it's better to have regulated resources that are being like distributed and like FDA approved and things of that nature than unregulated things, because that causes more harm to the buyers. And by criminalizing these things, such as sex work or undocumented workers like working, criminalizing this instead just puts them at larger disadvantages and doesn't necessarily stop them from doing this work, because at the end of the day they have to. Instead, we should be implementing more policy or representatives to ensure that complaints, issues are being handled in like day-to-day instances, rather than just policing these communities and further oppressing them. But it's very important that we all still actively like do things that align with the change we want to see, because although like individual action won't solely fix things, I do think our government in some ways are trying to be reflective of the people. So
yeah, and I think they fear people joining up and like thinking together. I mean, I think that's why they tried to shut down like the education system. They fear intelligent people coming together and talking about things. And so as long as we keep talking, things will happen. Probably not today or tomorrow or in a year, but they will happen as long as we keep filling up space.
Exactly.
take up space.
Take up space.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for watching our podcast. podcast, and we really got